This is a video about civilization, about domestication, about sedentism. It is a video about a time at the end of the last ice age, while the woolly mammoth was still being hunted by humans of the Neolithic. But not by the barbaric, ice age humans that we learned about as children, because this video is about a site in Upper Mesopotamia that has completely transformed how we need to conceptualize our Neolithic ancestors, not as creatures of pure instinct, but as visionaries, engineers, artists. This is a video about Göbekli Tepe. The year is 1994. On a beach in Thailand, student backpackers drink cheap cocktails and smoke cigarettes. Near them, an old dog lies in the sun. Without warning, they're joined by a local family of macaques, and the old dog springs into action. He has spent almost the entirety of his life with one watchful eye on the wall of jungle behind the beach, prepared for the monkeys' ever-imminent arrival. The backpackers are thrilled at the sight of the monkeys. They walk closer to get a better look, but what they see surprises them. They identify the cunning intelligence of the creatures, the quick movements of their eyes. They see the dexterity of their hands, but something is missing. Where they expected to see familiarity with their simian relatives, they see only a void. The faces of the monkeys have written on them violence, cruelty, and boundless self-interest. Now, for the first time, the backpackers really notice the dog. They notice his scars, his missing fur, signs of a lifetime given in service. They understand that he embodies the essential decency to which all moral humans aspire. While they could not help but see the shadow of human nature reflected in the monkeys, what was never obvious to them until this moment was the true depth of kinship shared between humanity and the dog. At that same moment, 8,000 kilometers away near the banks of the Euphrates River in Upper Mesopotamia, a German archaeologist by the name of Klaus Schmidt is looking for flint. Flint means the chance of ancient human activity, which is always of interest to Schmidt. He has spent the last decade of his life studying mysterious T-shaped pillars carved in stone by humans of the Neolithic. Now he is following a Kurdish farmer towards his grazing land. The farmer wants to show Schmidt a peculiar tepe. A tepe is just a small hill, but this particular tepe is unnaturally round in shape. This form has lent it the English name of Potbelly Hill, which in Turkish translates to Göbekli Tepe. Perhaps, says the Kurdish farmer, alluding to the curious shape of the hill, this is why this tepe was used as a Byzantine burial, explaining that there were tombstones at the top. As soon as he arrives, Schmidt knows that this tepe is not a construction of geology, and more shockingly, he can tell that the tombstones are just the tops of larger stone artifacts that are buried deep into the artificially constructed hill. What he doesn't know is that beneath his feet are stone T-pillars, 6 meters in height, carved with joints, limbs, and the texture of fabric, revealing a truth that he could not see despite his proximity. The megalithic T-pillars on which he had worked for the last decade were in fact colossal human forms, carved in an era long before such things were previously thought to be possible. This site was about to spawn a network of excavations that would and continue to rewrite the book on our most ancient origins. If you wanted to, right now you could go to the internet and purchase a ticket to the city of Şanlıurfa in eastern Anatolia. It is accessible from most international airports via a brief stopover in Istanbul. Once there, you will find many palatable 3- and 4-star hotel options in the €75 a night range that are walking distance from local amenities and restaurants. If you so desired, you could stay at the 5-star Hilton Hotel for €85, where they provide you with breakfast, eliminating the need to go out and eat local food. In the morning, you will be met by an air-conditioned minivan, which is booked to drive you 40 minutes through the flat, dry countryside, dotted with villages and olive groves, until you reach your destination, the world-famous archaeological excavation, Göbekli Tepe. There is a small queue to purchase your ticket of €20. Your discount card doesn't apply, so you reluctantly pay full price. Once inside, you are given the option to wait for the shuttle bus up to the Tepe or do the 1-kilometer walk yourself. You are conscious of the fact that your Hilton Hotel breakfast was excessive and decide the walk might do you good. You decide to make your way to the legendary Enclosure D. When you get there, you see the clear shape of the megalithic T-pillars. You take a moment to appreciate their 6-meter height. You study the animal carvings on them. You wonder if you could carve animals like that. You conclude that you probably could if you had a few weeks. You get back to the minivan in time for it to take you the 30-minute drive to the newer excavation of KARAHAN Tepe. There you see even more abstract rock forms. You are told that this site is a revelation, a rewriting of the earliest chapters of our history. These rock formations were a village with houses. Your first thought is that you are glad you don't live on top of rocks. You take a photo of an interesting-looking statue of a person and find a spot to sit, glance nervously at the time on your phone, and wonder how long until you can get back in the air-conditioned minivan. It can be hard to connect with this place. We are, after all, alive now, and the Taş Tepeler sites were active a very, very long time ago. So we should not attempt too hard to engage with the archaeological sites of this region as they are in their current state. Rather, we should go back into history. And then back some more. And then back all the way to the earliest roots of civilization, to the very heart of our shared storytelling as humans, where history and mythology become inextricably fused together, like atomic nuclei in the very cradle of our cosmic domicile. But we mustn't stop there, because we aren't even close to our destination. We need to go back to a time when this dusty plain was an oasis, and then grassland home to megafauna, and then a lush forest, back to the fringes of even prehistory, where Neolithic humans are constructing a temple. Now perhaps is beginning to look like our stop. But for the sake of this video, I want to go back further still, past a long frozen winter of 1,000 years and into the Paleolithic, right at the moment when we are beginning to sever ties with our animal roots. It is in this place that our story will begin, and from this vantage point that we will understand the true significance of what was discovered on a hill in eastern Anatolia in 1994 by a German archaeologist who was looking for flint. There's a mystery at the heart of the field of linguistics. It looms like the sun. It sits at the core of the entire discipline, yet few dare to look at it directly. Where does language come from? Certainly it is a behavior that evolved. We can even estimate that the evolution occurred in a window of between 50 and 200,000 years ago, in a period called the Paleolithic. Yet to imagine the first word, mutually understood between two Paleolithic humans, is somehow almost impossibly difficult. In fact, so mired in its own unanswerability is this question, that in 1866, the Linguistic Society of Paris prohibited any inquiry into the roots of language itself, citing that it would only encourage speculation. Humanity has an origins problem. The origin of language, the origins of matter and energy, the origin of time, and crucially to today's video, the origin of civilization. In his book Morphic Resonance, Rupert Sheldrake criticized the myopia of the scientific community. He elucidated the founding principle of science as, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. The one free miracle being the existence of anything at all, rather than nothing. Perhaps Sheldrake's criticism is unfair. Origins are not miraculous, but they do often require radically novel ways of thinking to be understood. In his book, Sheldrake attributes his quote to his collaborator and lifelong friend, Terence McKenna, a man who, in his life, proved himself consistently to be capable of producing such novel ideas. In 1992, McKenna wrote Food of the Gods, in which he proposed an inversion to an accepted order of events. McKenna suggested that before syntactic language with explicit meaning, there was conversation. McKenna imagined Paleolithic humans seated around a campfire, engrossed in conversation, rich with emotional and social significance, much like how humans might do today. The only difference was that the individual sounds being made by our Paleolithic ancestors were essentially meaningless. While it has long been considered academic self-sabotage to speculate on the sound of proto-language, McKenna, never one to bow to the orthodoxies of academia, at any opportunity would gladly offer his interpretation of what this form of communication sounded like.
Ziding quap maktiki pitech kveng huade molde ruf nobkahenget e faps titolch kvem bedige me hegengtecht.
McKenna called the proto-language of Paleolithic man glossolalia, the music of language, without the syntax. As we will see, this inversion of the lower order bureaucratic definition of words and the higher order art of conversation is the perfect analogy for how the excavation of Göbekli Tepe has inverted the once unanimously accepted story of civilization's origin. The new story we need to tell is one where civilization's syntax, writing, agriculture, and bureaucracy are in fact preceded by art, architecture, and mythology, which we can collectively view within this context as the music of civilization. While the story of humanity's transition towards civilization begins in the Paleolithic, this story takes place primarily in the Neolithic. I think here it is important to define what distinguishes these epochs. As creatures who seem to act in constant defiance of entropy, there is an uncomfortable condition of our existence that we would rather not fully address. That being that we live on a rock, which is orbiting a flaming ball of gas at 30 kilometers per second, and as such, we are subjected to the true titan of historical catalysts, climate change. The Earth has technically been in the grips of an ice age for the past 2.6 million years. But within that broad categorization, there are periods that we call glacial and interglacial. Currently, we live in an interglacial period called the Holocene. Interglacial periods are characterized by global temperatures that might be called temperate by the standards of contemporary humans. Generally, the transition from glacial to interglacial periods is gradual, but the last glacial period ended with a violent cold snap, which lasted for more than 1,000 years. This is a period that we call the Younger Dryas, and the role it played in the evolution of civilization was significant. In 1914, workers at the Oberkassel quarry in Germany's west were blasting rocks to be crushed and sold as aggregate when one of their explosions revealed the unmistakable sight of human remains. Discovering the bones of Paleolithic humans is not uncommon in German quarries, but nonetheless the site was shut down so that researchers from the University of Bonn could study the bones to see if they revealed anything interesting about our past. In this instance, the bones did exactly that. The two humans in the grave, one man and one woman, were buried with a dog. There was no sign of violence, no ritual sacrifice, and no evidence that the grave had been opened multiple times. It seems likely that the humans and their dog all died at the same time, from either asphyxiation, flooding, or a sudden contagious illness. What was most interesting to the researchers was what they found when they inspected the dog. The dog, who was still just a puppy at the time of death, suffered from canine distemper virus, which is highly lethal for dogs. In fact, it was concluded that there was no way this dog could have lived until the age it was, without intensive human care for most of its life. The dog that the researchers were looking at was frail and had missing teeth. Yet, despite the work required to keep it alive, and despite the complete lack of utility the dog could have offered, there it was, buried by the side of his human family. Something transformative happened in the long winter of the last glacial period. We entered that time of darkness, wild men, connected in spirit only to our simian roots, but we emerged as something quite different. Before the last glacial period, there were no dogs, only wolves. But by the time it ended, there were still wolves, but also there were dogs. In the same way, we can say that before that time, there were only wild men. But after, wild men still walked this earth, but alongside them existed a new kind of human. One who had severed the familial ties with his ape ancestors and had embraced a new family, a chosen family, not unlike the distinctly human tradition of marriage. It is understood that the face of the dog evolved to appeal to humans. There's a muscle in the eye of a dog that does not exist in the wolf. This creates expressions that are easily read by humans and can trigger the release of oxytocin in the human brain, much like when a human looks at a baby. A wolf cannot trigger this response. The humans who left the Ice Age also looked slightly different to the ones who entered, retaining a more juvenile expression into adulthood than their Paleolithic forebears, and with a much richer array of facial expressions. What is not widely known is that these adaptations were evolved in humans to appeal to dogs. The actual mechanics of animal husbandry are a topic for another video. For now, what matters is that the end of the last glacial period ushered in the age of domestication. And this important marker is what separates the Paleolithic from the new humans of the Neolithic. The same level of mutual domestication that occurred with the dog would not be repeated, but in the warming climate of the early Holocene, humans would begin the domestication of goats, sheep, pigs, cats, chickens, and horses. The story of the origin of human civilization that has been long accepted by archaeological orthodoxy, and the story that is told by the archaeological findings at Göbekli Tepe are radically different. They carry radically different implications and reveal two radically different variations on the human character. And it is in this period, at around 10,000 BCE, that these stories begin to diverge. Here's a thing that you could do if you wanted to. Catch a flight to the city of Baghdad, rent a car, and start driving south towards the city of Basra. Once you're about halfway to your destination, it's time to slow down a little. You're looking for a blue road sign. You'll know it when you see it because the sign is written in Arabic and English. You spot it from a distance and pull over to the side of the road to read what it says. The first written words started here. The translation could have used a proofread, but it does not detract from the significance of what is communicated on that sign. It is now that you notice the unusual mound of earth in front of you. Had you not seen the sign, there is no way that you would have noticed it, but once prompted, there is no mistaking that these are ruins. Now you take out your phone and open Google Maps. You look at your current location. The name is written in Arabic, but it is also written in another language, one that you've never seen before, and one that most likely only appears in this one instance in the entire Google Maps database. This language is cuneiform, and it says that you are standing in Uruk, the first city on Earth. In the 3rd century BCE, a Babylonian priest by the name of Berossus was compiling a definitive history of Babylon in Greek. The history of Babylon is firmly intertwined with the histories of each of the Mesopotamian city-states. Thus, a history of Babylon serves as a useful compendium of the region more broadly. Berossus was well versed in the ancient traditions and mythology of Mesopotamia, and drew on a multitude of sources to corroborate his book. So it is not without a raised eyebrow that one reads his history of the origin of Uruk. One day, a giant half-man, half-fish being named Oannes emerged from the Persian Gulf. His presence was terrifying, yet he was purely benevolent. He spent his days among the primitive humans who inhabited Mesopotamia, and at night returned to the sea. In his time with the humans, he imparted the skills of writing, mathematics, building, law, agriculture, art, and science. By the time Oannes had left the humans of Mesopotamia, Uruk had been constructed, and the Sumerian civilization was born. Probably the most unbelievable thing about this story is the fish man. But the second most unbelievable thing is the sudden emergence of every signifier of civilized society in such a short span of time, and all from one location. And this is still pretty unbelievable. Yet all credible evidence points to this part of the story of Oannes being completely true. It does seem to be the case that civilization in its entirety was born in southern Mesopotamia, in relative terms, basically overnight. There are theories for the sudden emergence of civilization. Australian historian V. Gordon Childe developed the agricultural surplus hypothesis in the 1950s, which provided one satisfying explanation. Childe stated that the humans who left the Ice Age were on the path towards agriculture. As the Ice Age receded into the ancient past, the lands of Mesopotamia began to transform from the lush hunter-gatherer's paradise of 10,000 BCE into the dry Levantine environment that we associate with the region today. The theory goes that the Neolithic humans started to gather more frequently around oases or the banks of rivers like the Euphrates, and were spending less time wandering. In this environment, gathered around valuable water sources, they learned the art of agriculture and were forced into cooperation. Once food became more plentiful from agriculture than it had been from gathering, people were free for specialization. Surpluses created inequality, which Childe argues is essential for civilization to function, as it precipitates social hierarchy and leadership. The strongest piece of evidence for Childe's theory is the oldest example of writing in human history. It is a ledger listing quantities of barley, a bureaucratic task that would be entirely inconceivable if it weren't for agricultural surplus. This is surely the green light for Childe's theory. Civilization is born out of surplus. We can close the book on another historical mystery. Well, we did, for the majority of the 20th century. But Childe's theory has one massive problem, and that problem is the excavations at Taş Tepeler. So now let us move north from Uruk, up along the path of the Euphrates towards eastern Anatolia to see what those excavations reveal. At last, on this journey from the origin of language in the Paleolithic to the moment of domestication, to the Neolithic revolution and construction of the first city ushering in the Bronze Age, we find ourselves, the mere blink of an eye away from this moment, right now, beneath the unforgiving sun of Anatolia, waiting for an air-conditioned minivan to take us back to our €85 per night Hilton hotel with free breakfast. You wonder if perhaps you have missed something in your time at the Taş Tepeler excavations, something that does not reveal itself so easily to the layperson. While visitors to Göbekli Tepe are guided to look upwards at the impressive 6-meter-high pillars, those who work on the excavations are aware that the true marvel is what is at their feet. Dug into the limestone floor of both Göbekli Tepe and KARAHAN Tepe are deep grooves that link together to form networks. The grooves meet at nodes, large rock basins that are placed strategically around the sites. These basins are cisterns, and the network of grooves are a water management system that once leveraged gravity to provide public reservoirs for clean water, 10,000 years before the first brick was laid on the Roman aqueducts. But even more consequential than the engineering at Taş Tepeler are the implications for historians, anthropologists, and philosophers. In this respect, it is not what archaeologists have found at Taş Tepeler, but what is missing. Now make no mistake, I do not want to undermine the achievement of Neolithic hunter-gatherers with no draft animals and no wheel, building 6-meter-high limestone monuments that are still standing 12,000 years later. The limestone blocks, each weighing around 20 tons, were quarried half a kilometre away and dragged uphill to be placed in their stacked orientation, before the limbs and texture of fabric were chiselled with fine stone tools. The uniformity of the pillars points to a level of craftsmanship that suggests specialization. Specialized workers require a distribution of resources at scale. Taş Tepeler had an economy. At one of the smaller excavations, Sefer Tepe, archaeologists uncovered the skull room, a collection of human skulls adorned with engravings, preserved and cared for. This behavior points to a veneration of the dead and a shared spirituality, possibly even something we could call religion. So what is this missing piece of the Taş Tepeler sites that is of such humanist significance? Naturally, it is of great interest to archaeologists as well as historians how the societies of Taş Tepeler were structured. Who was in charge? Was it a tyrannical king who projected raw physical power? Was it a patrician class who controlled resources and information? Was it an exalted religious order? People who are powerful in life invariably desire to be powerful in death. The key signifier for the archaeologist as to who these special people in a given society were is the status imparted into their graves. The Taş Tepeler region has many graves, but none are treated with any degree of exaltation. The archaeological evidence of the Taş Tepeler excavations reveal a human society with a sedentary population, advanced engineering, specialization, and an economy that distributed resources, but no hierarchy, no ruling class, no king. In 1940, Pablo Picasso walked out of a cave at Lascaux and declared, "We have invented nothing." He had been looking at the recently discovered artworks painted with iron oxide and animal fat by humans of the last glacial period. This story is apocryphal, but it speaks to the character of Picasso. Picasso, who was prone to self-aggrandizement, must have been thrilled that the earliest works of art in all human history bore an undeniable resemblance to his own work. In his book, Old Masters and Young Geniuses, University of Chicago economist David Gallinson suggested that there are two archetypal artistic categories. Gallinson suggested that every artist is either a Picasso or a Cézanne. Contemporary society loves a Picasso. Picasso dares to say we can unlearn the lessons that brought us here and build something new. He was, after all, living in occupied Paris at the time of visiting Lascaux. At the same time, we are skeptical of a Cézanne. Cézanne is conservative, blindly faithful to his practice, which is funded by patronage, hierarchy, blood money. Of course, in reality, Picasso adored Cézanne, and it is foolish to simplify human characters into such rigid categories. The archetypes of Picasso and Cézanne say less about the men and their art, and more about us and the society that we have inherited. V. Gordon Child's surplus first model of human civilization suggests that the kind of patient labor exhibited by Cézanne is the product of a spider's web of tangled economic and political interests. Cézanne's afternoons of focused, attentive brushstrokes are built on the backs of war, religious dogma, and class inequality. It is only natural that we should aspire to return to a time before war and class and sedentism and agriculture and writing, to a time where there were only Picassos, or so we once thought. The excavations at Taş Tepeler reveal a new story of the origin of civilization, one that Klaus Schmidt called the Temple First hypothesis. One where the first society was without the heavy shadow of a ruling class, without the dogmatic church, without the corrupt police. One where there were undoubtedly Picassos, but there were also Cézannes, working patiently on relief carvings, discovering the animal forms embedded within 20-ton limestone blocks. Maybe the excavations at Taş Tepeler give us permission to disentangle the web of civilization, corruption, and power, and take a temple-first perspective on humanity at large. The impossible dream of an egalitarian society perhaps seems a little less impossible. After all, we know that we have done it before. Much like the archetypes of Picasso and Cézanne, what that world looks like probably says more about you than it does about reality. What matters is that we know that 12,000 years ago, Neolithic humans, forever changed by a 1,000-year-long winter, emerged from the cold without writing, without agriculture, and without the wheel, and built a temple, or a commune, or a township, or a favela, or a slum, or a cult, or a utopia, or whatever we choose for it to be at this rare moment of opportunity to redefine the word civilization.